Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. And if you are just tuning in with me for the very first time, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm really glad you're here with me today. I am your host, Heather Carey, nutritionist, chef, mom, and a woman who has been around the block with food. I want to open up about real food in relation to health, weight, and our bodies so you can make peace with what you eat. Hi, everybody. It's Heather. Welcome back to my podcast, Real Food Stories. You know, I talk to a lot of women about menopause, health and nutrition, weight loss, and just how to cope and feel their best during this time of transition. And I know that I have a couple of men at least listening in, and I don't want you to feel left out. So I decided to go a little rogue today. And I invited my husband, Mark, on to sit in the hot seat with me. Mark is not a stranger to the menopause transition. First of all, he lives with me. And as I am very open about talking about all the nuances and quirks of this time of my life, he might know more than the average man, but still, he's always open to learning more. And he was more than willing to come on and have a conversation with me. Mark is also an employment attorney who sees a lot of sexism, ageism, just to name a few, that he thinks could be directly related to menopause. So he was curious to know more. Mark and I did a podcast episode actually on stress in the workplace a while back. That was episode number 17, if you want to take a listen to that. That was actually a really good, informative episode about just what it's like to feel stressed out at work and what you could do about it. So in today's episode, like I said, I wanted to do something a little different. And Mark is coming on to have an open, honest conversation about menopause. We often think of menopause as something that only women experience, but the reality is it has an impact on our partners too. I wanted to hear his perspective on what it's been like to go through this phase with me and to help other men understand a little more about what's going on during menopause in general. We covered a lot of ground from what he understood about menopause before we started talking about it, how he's seen the changes up close, and so much more. We also discussed how menopause can affect a relationship, what surprised him the most, and what he thinks other men should know about supporting their partners through this time. So it was a real down-to-earth chat full of insights and a couple of laughs a few times. So whether you're navigating menopause yourself or you're here to understand what your partner might be going through, join us today for this unique, insightful conversation. Let's bring the men into the conversation about menopause. So take a listen.
How are you, Heather?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay.
All right. So I wanted you to come on the podcast today because I did a podcast last week where I talked to the men out there. I have a lot of women on my podcast who listen, and I talk about menopause a lot. And I realized that there was, I think, a lack of information for men because there's a lack of information for women out there.
Okay.
As it is. There's almost no education for women, especially coming even from your gynecologist or your general practitioner. So things are happening now, I think, in the world of menopause education. And I think that it's becoming more
information is coming out and people are becoming more aware and what to expect about, the topic of menopause, both in their relationships and in their social relationships at work.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that I think it's hard enough for women to talk to each other about menopause. It's been a secret for a long time. I mean, I remember 10 years ago just going through perimenopause, and it's just something you didn't talk to your girlfriends about. It was just this kind of secret thing. And don't even talk about hormones or going on hormone therapy or anything, because that was like a very scary thing to try. So it's hard enough for women to talk to each other about it, but try talking to your husband about it or your partner and getting them on board, because like it or not, you're going through, you
Right.
live with me and you're going through my experience with me.
Right.
And menopause is a huge, huge deal. You probably don't even realize it, but it is a monumental phase of life to go
Right.
through.
And I thought that's all true, and that's what I researched as well and discovered. That's juxtaposed against the lack of information, at least in terms of women who understand what menopause is. And I have to say, I did go to a seminar online maybe about last year because I was also interested as well. And
hold on, tell me about that seminar.
It was just about menopause, and it was the menopause. I guess there's a national society. It was sponsored by them. Whoever that
the National Menopause Society.
Right, and so I went on this. I basically just listened to a Zoom meeting, but what it confirmed.
Actually, I'm sorry. It's the North American Menopause Society. Sorry.
Right,
correct.
And the major confirmation was that women didn't understand what menopause was, which shocked me.
How did you find out about this?
I think
workshop?
You sent me a link.
Oh, I sent it to you?
Yeah.
Oh, but it had something to do with menopause in the workplace. So I want to pause for a second and just say that Mark is an employment attorney and deals with all sorts of different employment issues, but has seen some cases where women who are in their 40s, 50s getting discriminated, right? Could you say that? And maybe there's some menopause discrimination.
Yeah, the courts don't call it that. They call it gender discrimination or sex discrimination. It doesn't matter. It's just that women going through menopause while at work experience, biased reactions by people who don't understand what they're going through. Both men and women will exhibit the bias. So
you learned something from going to this workshop. That's great.
Yeah, I learned that women didn't understand. A lot of women didn't understand what menopause was, which shocked me.
Women.
Right. I was on the presumption that all women knew this information. And then you did all your research and then verified for me that, no, that's not the case.
Well, that's because that's the thing. You don't learn this in like sex education class in junior high. And you certainly then don't learn it anywhere else. And when your gynecologist only gets a couple hours of medical school education around menopause, there is a lot of misinformation and no one's really talking about it. So and if you try to talk to your mom and she doesn't really know, my mom didn't even remember when she went through menopause. So
I remember when my mom went through menopause, but she didn't talk to me about it.
Of course she didn't talk to you about it, right? Because it was probably like a woman thing. And why would she talk to you about it? Because you are a man. But men should know about this because every single woman on the planet goes through menopause.
Right.
There is not a single woman who is immune from menopause.
So I wanted to participate in your discussion and your, helping get the word out about this topic because being a man and maybe coming from my point of view can help. And if there's listeners who are men, be brave, just step on in and lean in, whatever. It's information that'll be helpful for your relationships with work and social and also your spouse. So that's why, and I applaud you for trying to get out the word about this topic because, again, it's so grossly misunderstood. Or not understood at all.
So right now I'm in the middle of menopause, the menopause transition, as I like to call it. There's perimenopause. I think you probably know this, right? I talked about this last week on the podcast. There's perimenopause. That's like this wild ride of your hormones are going crazy up and down and like fits and starts. And then there's menopause where you don't have your period for a whole year. And then there's postmenopause. So I'm in that peri kind of menopause phase right now. And I've gone through a huge amount, I think, of just changes and just adjustments to being in menopause. But Do you feel like, from the man's perspective, that you have noticed this about me?
Yes and no. I mean, I you've talked about this for such a long time. Back in your 40s, you thought you were starting to go through it, and now into your 50s, I really don't. I don't really. I guess I'm more enlightened, so it doesn't bother me, or I'm not shocked about if anything did happen, but I'm not seeing anything happen in terms. I'm seeing a gradual transition for you. It's not up and down. That's what I'm viewing.
Mm-hmm. So I went on hormones very quickly. I knew back in my 40s that I was definitely going to go on hormone replacement therapy. I had no doubt in my mind,
Right.
just from what I mean, I don't know, little I knew about it, but I was not getting a lot of support from my gynecologist at all at
That's
the time.
unfortunate.
I just knew that I was going to go on it, and I would be a good candidate for it. So I've bypassed a lot of the more aggressive symptoms.
What, hot flashes and
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple, and I think
I never heard you really talk about it.
because I've been on hormones.
Right.
So, and that comes with some sort of risk, but not a huge amount of risk for me. I'm a good candidate for hormones, and it's been really, really helpful for me.
You said that.
As far as hot flashes, which are just you could feel like you're just burning up. I mean, I have some friends who are just going through it, and they feel like this is something that they just have to go through and get through. And I have a different feeling on it, but it's a very personal choice to go on hormones.
Well, you believe you don't have to grin and bear it,
No, nor do I want to.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I haven't had, my sleep doesn't really get affected by stuff, but has my body kind of shifted? Have I felt like I've gained some weight? Have I things,
I think you look great all the time, so I kind of biased.
Well, thank you.
Kind of rocking it right now in your 50s, so
thanks.
You're welcome.
It's a funny thing getting older and going through menopause, because it's this. I've also said, it's like puberty in reverse. Instead of your hormones going up and up and up, you're losing something. And as a woman in this society, in this day and age where we are so stuck on youth, it can really make you feel
less of a woman, or
a little bit. Yeah. Sometimes. I mean, it just,
That doesn't have to be the case. I think I guess there's an answer here that you don't have to feel that way, is what I guess you're trying to say. There's a message.
Well, I think that, anyway, this is just something that I sometimes grapple with. I think that you're very supportive, though, and I don't ever hear you say anything. But there's a lot of men out there who might feel very
on the
threatened.
defense.
I mean, not as a threatened, yes, or just not really into it and not really into their wife aging.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you feel about that?
My first reaction to that is that there's a lack of information. Once you have more information and you begin to understand, you become more compassionate to what your spouse, your wife is going through. Maybe that's the first thing. So more information is better. Becoming familiar with it. I mean, like the meeting I went to, there were men on the meeting, and that was very helpful. Well, obviously, the majority of people were female, but it's just information. Having more information is going to reduce that, that inherent bias that there's something, going on, or maybe the man feels defensive, like it's his fault, but it's not his fault. It's just you have to understand there's a change happening, and I think that can go a long way to resolving. You've said a lot of people get divorced through this period of time.
Yeah, there's a lot of divorce that happens because I think that women are going through a gigantic change. Men don't totally understand it. I think there starts to be this lack of communication.
Yeah.
And or maybe it's just brings out the anything that's sort of been kind of tamped down. Women, I think you just can't what we were doing in our 20s and 30s to lose weight or to get it just doesn't work the same way when you're now in your 40s and 50s.
Yeah, you said because I know too much because talk to me too much about nutrition, but your metabolism slows down. And
yes, your metabolism starts to slow down. So a lot of women blame weight gain on menopause, going through menopause and hormones. But really the reality is that it's not your hormones, it's your metabolism is naturally just slowing down the older you get. Same with men, by the way. It's not just women.
I've noticed
women
that.
are just not immune to this. And so we need to be doing some different things. We need to strength train more, gain muscle. The more muscle you have, that helps increase your metabolism.
Right.
And can't just get away with not starving ourselves for a couple of days and losing 5 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's a really confusing, and I think.
Well, part of the reason you wanted me to come on the episode was because of a kind of a male's perspective going through this. Maybe we can kind of go back to that in terms of maybe race. What are some questions? What are the questions that men might have about what women are going through? My perspective is kind of it's a little jaded because I do a lot of employment work, so I see a lot of bad behavior. Men at work treating women very, very poorly at the age group. Predominantly, it's in their 50s, and once I started to learn more about menopause, I started to realize maybe this is a bias related to a lack of education awareness about women going through menopause by men. And if they knew what they were doing, they'd say, wait a minute, okay, maybe they would pause. Maybe they would, allow a little more flexibility in their interactions with women at work instead of just the gut reaction that she's crazy or she's acting like a biatch for the day or, because men can be really ugly.
But don't you feel like a lot of this is based in ageism? I mean, that we are just that there is this bias against women getting older. I mean, you see women on the internet, like famous women. I mean, the amount of probably money they spend on getting their faces done and Botox and surgeries and everything. I mean, all in the goal of just looking as young as possible.
Right.
And it starts to look ridiculous, but we have a very hard time accepting getting older. But meanwhile, the reality is men are getting older too. Right? Your metabolism is dipping just like mine is. You are losing muscle just like me.
But there's still this weird thing in our country still that men and women, and on this topic of aging, women get a harsher wrath on it by society, culture, even by themselves, I suppose, than men do. Men, look at how many men have a punchy gut, walking around. There's not that much of an influence on them to, get lean and fit, in their 50s.
Right. There's not as much pressure.
But for women, it's the exact opposite.
Exactly.
Right. So it's a kind of a double-edged sort of pain because you have gender discrimination bias and you also have age bias happening at the same time when you're going through menopause.
Right. But then there's, so throw in the menopause symptoms. I mean, one thing that menopause can do, hormones, you're estrogen rules the world when it comes to for women. And once it starts taking a dip, it can affect everything from head to toe. It affects your bones, your heart, your cholesterol levels, but it can also affect your mood, moods in a way, and just feeling that
Can you explain that more from for me as a man and those who are listening to that? Tell me how it affects mood. What if you don't take a hormone? How is your mood then during menopause? That's really the issue.
Well, I think it's kind of complex. I don't think that you're taking hormone replacement therapy to help improve your mood. It's not you're going to take estrogen and your mood is going to be happy and peaceful and even keeled. But I think if without the estrogen, it can affect your moods. Number one, if you're not sleeping well. Okay, so if you're waking up with night sweats and stuff, right, and you're not sleeping well, you are chronically exhausted, that's a total mood killer. And
what about alcohol? I mean, alcohol, people drink alcohol and they don't realize the connection with sleep and with menopause. Is there a connection? Is there can you speak to that?
You mean, but with mood and alcohol?
Yeah, hangovers obviously produce, depression and all that. But
Wait, let me go back to the
Sure.
moods for a second because I think, like, for me, for example, before I went into perimenopause, the word anxiety did not exist in my life. I never would have defined myself as like an anxious person. And when I started going into perimenopause, all of a sudden I just felt a lot more anxiety. I felt a lot of like fear of the future. I still feel like this. And I don't know if it's from just my hormones, but I have to think that it has something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say too, that just because I'm on hormone replacement therapy, it's not a miracle cure for everything that ails you. I mean, you're not taking it because, it's prescribed for hot flashes and for vaginal dryness. It's FDA approved for that.
Okay.
It's beneficial for your heart, your bones, and other health issues, but you're not taking it for that because to prevent heart disease.
Okay.
But we know that estrogen and heart issues, estrogen and bones have a direct correlation. There's no doubt. So I feel fine taking it as maybe hopefully a preventative.
But what
thing.
if you're a woman, you're not taking hormone replacement by choice, and how is a woman going to experience anxiety? How is menopause going to appear for that?
Well, the thing is, I
emotionally?
feel like I do experience some anxiety, and I'm on hormones, but I don't know what I would be like if I wasn't on hormone replacement.
Well, what have you read and researched about emotions, emotionality of people who go through menopause who are not on hormone replacement, or just in general in terms of going through menopause?
I just know that, and this is just from talking to a lot of women, that some women say I am so angry all the time. My moods are just in the toilet. I'm just in a bad mood.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't look at me the wrong way.
And this is what men see. This is in their uneducated view about this is what they see. That's why I'm pushing you to kind of go down that road.
Right. I don't know if hormone replacement therapy can fix that.
Right.
But just during this time, I think it's a hard physical, mental, and emotional adjustment to back out of our estrogen production.
Yeah.
And I think that just has something to do with it.
So should a woman at work, or at home, and tell her husband or work colleagues that she's going through menopause and just kind of be transparent about it? Would that work to help people? I mean,
absolutely. I think so. I think at the very least, I don't know about work. That's your area of expertise. But for just at home, to have a dialogue with your partner, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that to keep it a secret or to not talk about it.
Right.
I think is not doing you not doing a woman any favors. And it's not doing your husband any favors either, because I think they should know about this, that maybe it's not their fault that if I'm feeling kind of a mood, but I'm just going through things. I'm going through something.
Right.
It's not going to last forever, hopefully not. And I think it is an opportunity to keep the doors open for a lot of communication.
Yeah. Well, I think that should apply equally to at work as well. Just be more transparent about it. And I'll throw this one in. I did do some research about this topic, a year ago or so, but England is currently the forefront of menopause movement. It is out in the open at the workplace, and everybody's really supportive about it. It's just that in this country, we just haven't yet caught up to that. I don't know why that is, but they've kind of handled the issue. And maybe you can talk about that.
I think Well, from what I see, I think that England is definitely ahead of the game as far as talking about menopause, and I think menopause in the workplace and everything.
So maybe it's just more information, more education's happening there, that people are becoming more aware. And maybe that's just the simple solution here, is becoming more aware, sharing.
And I think it's happening here too, but also what I see here is that along with more doctors getting better education and the North American Menopause Society being more of a leader also comes along with a lot of quacky wellness people who are trying to sell you supplements and do
that's not helping.
Unethical things like that. So you just have to be wary of that. But I think I feel very excited about this time right now with menopause, because I think that we are getting more and more educated on it. And
it seems like that's happening.
Yeah. And I think it's going to become hopefully just a normal part of life, rather than, some like dark secret that women have to kind of suffer through alone.
Yeah. Again, I just can't, say enough that I did not know that women did not know about menopause. It was just shocking to find that fact out. But now,
but how would we know? I mean, how would we know?
It was just an assumed thing that all women, because they go through,
I mean, I didn't know about. I really didn't. I knew that there was like menopause looming. But then when I learned that there was actually perimenopause, and then that could last for
10 years?
10 years, I was shocked. I really, this is how very little education I've gotten on it.
In the era of the internet and doctors don't know. And the internet is, what's the internet full of?
Yes. And I mean, I've probably have told you, I had conversations with my gynecologist who
clueless
dismissed me, and my general practitioner who told me that she'd rather go to jail than go on hormones. And we know a lot now about hormones and how they can really benefit and help. So we're progressing, I think, with our menopause experience.
So what should men take away from all of this new information in your mind?
That's a good question. I think that men who have partners who are going through menopause, it would be a huge benefit to just be very understanding and to do a lot of listening, not fixing, not giving advice, like a lot of men like to do sometimes.
Yes, they like to fix. I like to fix.
I get it. I understand that. But this is a thing that
I can't fix this, by the way.
Right. You absolutely cannot fix. And it's not something that you're going to totally understand. It's like childbirth. You're never going to be able to understand exactly what childbirth and just being pregnant is like, right?
I witnessed it, but no,
I know, but you will never understand fully. And same with going through the menopause transition. You will never be able to understand exactly how it feels. Some women don't even like notice it. There are a few of those lucky women who they don't even get phased.
That's not the
by
norm,
it.
though.
Like they stop getting their periods one day and boom, boom, that's it, done. Then there's the rest of us, and that's absolutely not been my experience. I feel like my perimenopause has gone on for like a ridiculous amount of time. But it's, and then there's also this feeling of it can be like kind of grieving a little bit. You are winding down like these really essential hormones, and estrogen is what makes a woman and makes you fertile and is responsible for being able to have children and get pregnant and reproduction, and it can feel like you're kind of mourning in a way. I mean, I definitely have had those kind of feelings.
See, as your spouse and hearing all that, I mean, I have to only express a great deal of compassion, because that's all I can do, and just sit there and listen and, support you as you go through it. I guess that's the takeaway from this episode is just simply men can give this gift of like compassion and understanding and listening. And it's hard for men to do that, because they don't like to do that. They like take control and all that other stuff. But if you just calm down and just sit there and pay attention to it and give compassion, can go a long way to having a more vibrant relationship with your spouse and with your coworkers.
I think that would be the best thing that a man can do for a woman, is just to be really open with communication, curious about it, and not that like, oh, I'm just going to leave her alone and let her kind of deal with it, which I think a lot of men like to do too, is just that like, I'll just leave her alone so she doesn't have to, be burdened by me. But I don't know, a feeling of like we're kind of in this together is because the thing is, like I said before, men go through they're not going through menopause, but you are also aging along right with me, right?
Yep.
So,
feeling the aches and pains.
Yeah. So I think to maybe get on the same page with, if you want to be looking at how you eat, like right now, like we've got 3 kids, but they don't live with us. And so it's just most of the time, it's just the 2 of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's changed how we plan meals and how we eat. I mean, we cook a ton at home, but it just to be on the same page with it is super important. Even being physically active together, or we do a lot of hiking.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too.
Yeah, doing things together.
So you don't feel like you're alone.
Yeah, you shouldn't suffer alone. If you're suffering, if you want to call that suffering.
Right.
So why don't you talk to me about the relationship of alcohol and menopause?
I think, well, first of all, alcohol, especially, you know what I feel about alcohol and just health in general. I think that there is no level of alcohol that is healthy for you. That's that thinking of red wine is good for you, and a little bit of alcohol is beneficial for your health is really a myth. And so I am very biased about this. I just don't think that there's any.
I think the federal government's on your side here. They're saying no amount of alcohol is good.
Right. No amount of alcohol is good.
Right.
That said, when women are going through menopause and feeling physically, like, let's call it miserable,
right,
to mildly uncomfortable, that, and looking for ways to cope with it.
Right.
I think a lot of women fall back on alcohol to make them feel better, but this is a totally temporary fix. Plus, alcohol and menopause really do not mix. Okay,
Why?
The more like you like this drop in estrogen, you become a lot more sensitive to alcohol. A lot of women can't handle alcohol like they used to. They can't metabolize it the same way, and even like 1 to 2 drinks can make them feel like really miserable.
Right.
And like can't handle hangovers and stuff like that. So it's
throwing gasoline on the fire.
Yeah, it's something that you want to really consider cutting out. I think it just aggravates symptoms, and it doesn't really do you any good in the long run. And there's other ways to maybe help you cope. I mean, there's therapy, there's meditation, there's making sure you get a sleep. I mean, sleep, I've talked about this. I mean, sleep is like everything to me.
Right.
I'm not perfect with it by any means, but it's definitely something that is like very high priority on my list, because when I don't get a good night's sleep, my day is kind of done in sometimes. So
what about the role of exercise every day, an hour a day at least, something cardiovascular?
Yeah, exercise is great too. I mean, exercise is really great for you mentally and physically, and that, yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of things we should be doing every day for ourselves, both men and women.
Yes.
I feel better when I exercise. I feel lousy when I don't exercise.
Right.
That's my mood.
Yeah.
Changes.
And these are things that you could be doing maybe together more.
Right.
Which can help just forge the bond between the two of you.
I have a bond with you. I found this conversation really informative.
You have found this informative?
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to ask me about menopause? I mean, anything that you can think of, or anything that you feel like maybe other men, like, I don't know, like friends of yours, would they be talking to their wives about this
No.
menopause transition? Well, that's why we were doing the podcast today, to maybe hopefully get this.
It's kind of like
out there.
let her be attitude of just, wait till she comes back from the dark side and then comes back. And that's probably what a lot of men maybe, feel. But that doesn't have to be that way. That's a bias that you should get past, because as you can hear, it's like, I don't do that to Heather. And, so it's just simply a bias. It's a preconceived stereotypic notion in your brain. You need to remove it. And that can go a long way to improving your relationships.
Yeah, I think that's correct. That like, oh, let me leave her alone, let her get through this. But I don't think that serves anybody.
I think
during this time,
the other male guy thing that will happen is, men tend to get defensive very, very quickly about whatever they're perceiving, like it's their fault. So if you're watching your spouse go through something and, she's going through menopause, or a coworker, you're going to intimately or just intuitively say it's my fault as a man and get defensive about it. And that's not going to help the situation either. So maybe I'll just pause, take a breath about what are you really watching? What's really happening here? And then give a benefit of the doubt. There might be other things happening. But if the person's told you they're going through menopause, well, then definitely give them the benefit of the doubt and give them some space to have a conversation about it. And that may go a long way to avoiding a lot of unnecessary turmoil.
So men, don't take everything so personally.
Yeah.
Right?
And I've done that. So I can say that I know what that's like. So
You've taken things personally.
Absolutely. A lot of men do, because they want to be perfect and, controllers and, men and, all that stupid stuff. So yes.
Okay.
But then when you get older, you learn that you get more wiser.
So if I just said, like, listen, I'm having a bad day, and
what? That's my fault? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I understand that.
That's a very large man concept that I'm sure a lot of people listening to this who are men can completely relate to me on those two issues about women in a dark moment or being defensive. And that's what I kind of thought about before this, the coming on doing the conversation today. I was like, those are really the two things I think men think about in kind of a reactionary mode. And it's just unnecessary. And I think they can just listen to this as something really going on with your spouse or coworker, friends, and you really need to pay attention. And that can go a long way to helping you understand them, because you're not going to control them in anything you do. It's going to just happen, and you just go along with it.
I mean, listen, this is like a temporary phase. All women go through this, right? And
Right.
All women get out on the other side, kind of. I mean, once you go through menopause, that like post-menopause, there's no post about menopause. You're then always menopausal the rest of your life. But I think this like fluctuation in hormones, which is, I think, contributes to like the craziness of it, and like maybe you're in your moods and everything. That's temporary, right? Eventually hormones level out, whether or not you go on hormone replacement therapy or not. But it helps if on being on hormone replacement, because it just helps relieve some of those like really nagging symptoms.
Right.
But we all go through it and kind of get onto another side. And if the men in our lives can just understand that this is a huge, huge change. Like, I can't stress that enough. It is a big, giant deal not for every woman, but for most women, for me, at least, it's been a big deal. And it's definitely makes me like need to reevaluate a lot of things, just how I'm moving, how I'm eating, how I'm sleeping, how I'm taking care of myself, and to have a lot of kindness for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and compassion, and it helps to know that you're in on it with me.
Well, I'm glad you actually feel that way about me, because that feels like I'm actually doing something. And
right.
So that's what I mean. It's like I've gotten educated. I do read about this. I mean, I have to take care of my own clients who go through this, but if I'm more educated, I have a more of an understanding about this huge event that you're going through, and it's entirely right. And so I'm just grateful you've exposed me to all this, and now you've exposed all these people who are listening to this.
Well, whether you like it or not, you're getting exposed.
No,
because I am a person who talks about it a lot, and it's what I do for my career. So
I'm grateful to have the information because it's an awareness that it jumps over stereotypes. It does go a long way. I mean, and it's quick information. It's not something you can get on an AI chat GDP, whatever, and just look up and you get all the information in 2 seconds. You become educated. It's that quick.
That's true.
And
that's true. But you could also just have a conversation with your wife and get a lot of education that way as well.
Sometimes men don't like to communicate, which is probably another facet of, I just discovered that communication is hard for men. Mm-hmm. And that might be an obstacle. And maybe a lot of women are saying, yes, that's right. And, for many years that, again, I'm older now, so I'm wiser and more communicative, but men have a problem communicating. And so that might be an obstacle as well. So if that helps, more communication, more understanding can go a long way. And because you want to be supportive of your spouse.
That's correct. So I think that's a good way to end our conversation. And I thank you so much for coming on my podcast today. I really appreciate it. I know this was not easy for you at first, and I asked you to do me a big favor and come on and talk about it.
I can do you a solid. I actually enjoyed it. I always enjoy coming on.
Good. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Because I think that this is important. I realize, I talk to women so much, and it's just, and I'm trying to always keep this dialogue of communication open with women because I think we need to talk about it. But it just kind of hit me the other day that the men in our lives don't have a lot of
a role.
Well, I mean, they should, and they just, don't. It's just if women are confused, men are even really more confused.
Yeah, I agree.
So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather.
And maybe you'll come back again and we'll have another conversation.
Anytime.
And as always, if you loved this podcast, please consider gifting me with a 5-star review. It is so helpful for me to get the word out on real eating, our real bodies, and real food stories. Thank you so much and have a great week. Bye for now.